Welcome to the She's Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hi there. This is now the third podcast where I have remotely recorded a shorter episode with a guest to address how we might best get through this challenging time that's called a global pandemic. This is a rough time for everyone, and while I don't necessarily agree with the idea that we're all in this together, we are all going through this at the same time. And the reason I say we're not in this together, it's because I think that everyone is going through it at their own pace and bringing to it our past experiences. And that's all different. We're all different. So we're all processing it at different rates, and we've got different things that we bring to the table to try to understand it. My aim here is to hopefully provide a bit of comfort, a bit of inspiration, no matter what stage of grief, confusion, or understanding you might be in while trying to figure out what this is all about, what this pandemic means to us in the greater scheme of things. Now, I'm regularly in touch with a lot of people each week, and it seems that a person either has a lot of time on their hands and is using it to catch up on house projects and connect more deeply with friends and family, while others are just in over their heads with work, and many of those people are working in the healthcare field. My heart goes out to everyone because no matter what camp you're in, I know it's difficult to navigate this. It really is a struggle. We all have our ups and downs, and I just hope that if and when you're down, you're reaching out to others, or if you suspect someone is down and struggling, that you are reaching out to them to provide support. If you do find yourself struggling and you need something to lift you up, the Be Bold Facebook group, and that is for women only, it's been a wonderful way for us to encourage each other. Now, normally we post the things we're doing to be bold, but over the past few weeks, we've been posting every day the things that we're doing to stay happy and healthy right now. It's been really great to see ideas that have bubbled up. And so many people are sharing there. So please do join us. It's facebook.com/groups/BeBoldGroup. Now, today's conversation is with Jannell MacAulay. And you might recall Jannell from episode number 53. Boy, this was going on nearly 2 years ago now when I last spoke with her. And she was just retiring from her 20-year career in the Air Force, where she was a pilot and combat veteran. She is now a mindfulness specialist and a wellness educator, among many other things. What she does is she helps others optimize their performance while in a high-stress environment. And while we all might not be trying to optimize our performance, we are in a high-stress environment. So her words of wisdom are something that we could really use right now. She has a really great approach in terms of how we can best navigate through these trying times, and has some really great tips that are accessible to everyone. One side note, we recorded this a couple of weeks ago, and she does mention getting outside into nature. Now, for many of us, while we can still go outside and get exercise, actually getting into nature, such as into a park or on a trail, that is no longer possible. Just getting out and getting fresh air is highly recommended no matter where you are. With that, please enjoy this conversation with Jannell MacAulay. I know that we have sat down and had a fantastic conversation not too long ago, and I'll direct folks to that so they can listen to that and hear all about your background in terms of a bigger picture. But would you, just for the purposes of today, would you do me a favor and just give me like a little short synopsis, in case people haven't heard that episode, a short synopsis of your background?
Sure. I just spent 20 years in the Air Force. I recently retired. Most of my career was spent as a combat pilot, commander, diplomat, and also an academic. And I went back to get my PhD for the Air Force as part of kind of my job. And I wanted to solve the problem that I was personally struggling with, which was, how to accelerate my professional success without having to sacrifice my health and relationships along the way. And, what I noticed in my research was that whether it's combat or carpool or a corporate boardroom, our physiology responds to stress in the same way. And if we could get command of our mindset in those moments, no matter where we are on the spectrum of life, we could optimize our performance and how we respond to stress. So that's really what I focused my PhD work in. I was then offered the opportunity to command a squadron of 400 joint service members from the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, both civilians and active duty. And I was integrated mindfulness and human performance initiatives rooted in mindfulness kind of as the key tool to command our mindset. And so it was a pilot program, kind of the first of its kind. And from there, I now speak and consult on that experience on human performance and stress optimization, high performance mindset. And so I know that that's something that is quite universal, especially as we deal with what we're going through today.
Right. And so you're retired right now from the military.
I am, yes. Yes. My husband is still active duty. So I'm technically a military spouse right now, and we are stationed in Utah.
Well, congratulations. I think when we last spoke, you were just retiring and just moving. So it was all pretty new to you at that point. So, and now you've created this business and you are working with Michael Gervais. And are you working specifically with him, or are you working beyond that as well?
Yes. So I have my own personal consulting and speaker business where I do it independently, but I also have a joint partnership with Dr. Michael Gervais and Coach Pete Carroll of the Seahawks. So the two of them own a company called Compete to Create. And we have partnered to create a program and course called Warrior's Edge that is specific high performance mindset training for high stress occupations like the military, first responders, medical professionals, people who put their lives on the line and have to make those split second decisions. So we've built this course specifically for them to help them really optimize their performance in those high stress environments, and also help them with the inevitable transitions that they all go through when you're in a uniform service and community, as a public and community servant. And when you kind of take off that uniform, transitions can be very difficult for folks. And so the program is also very well suited for those individuals as well.
So can you describe, we are in unprecedented, which is the term that many people are using right now, but it is very true. We're in unprecedented times. We're in a very unique situation. No one has been through this before, not to this extent. There have been worldwide pandemics in the past, but not to the severity that we are experiencing right now. Drawing upon your experience with working with first responders and with military people, and through the Warrior's Edge, I think specifically, what can you draw upon that, and what kind of lessons and maybe techniques and tools can you provide to people or suggest to people, just everyday people like myself going through this?
The first thing I think everybody needs to realize, and this is across the spectrum and a universal theme, is that we're all normal if we are uncomfortable or this uncertainty brings up some anxiety in our lives. I don't want anyone out there who might be experiencing those types of emotions to think that they're abnormal in any way. Especially people who are in high stress occupations, uncertainty, in the military, we kind of joke that is, the theme of our lives. We never know when we're going, where we're going, what's going to happen. The unpredictability just of our jobs in general is part of the job description. However, it is completely normal because this is such the shift, right? And the way that we're thinking, the way that we're acting with each other, the way that our entire nation is kind of coming together in some ways and then also having trouble in others. A lot of people are worried about the future. What is this new normal going to look like? So the first thing I want everyone to realize is that feeling that way is 100% normal. And in fact, the best thing we can do for ourselves in those moments is not push those emotions and feelings away, but really embrace them and sit with them a little bit and reflect with them. The more we kind of try to pretend that they don't exist or we're something we're not, it's the harder it's going to be for us to really adjust and get through the process. So I think that's the first part. And if you have children who might be going through some anxiety in this time too, it's really good to just listen to them as well and hear them out, understand their perspective and their emotions, and let them have a moment to kind of sit with them. So that's the first thing. The second aspect of this crisis that I think is very important is to change the narrative from this term social distancing and try to think about it in terms of physical distancing, but that we still want to be socially connected. Because I think there's a misnomer going around when we call it social distancing. We kind of incur this idea that we're supposed to be isolated and lonely, and that is not really good for anyone's mental health, especially in this crisis. We need to be connecting with each other. We need to understand that everybody's in the same boat and the feelings we're feeling are normal. And so I really would like that messaging to start shifting. We are physically distanced to provide that safety for ourselves and the healthcare professionals and the other people in our life that we love, but we don't have to be socially distanced. So we need to find ways to connect and use technology, which is great to do that, because that's going to be important for our health. And then the third aspect, when you talk about this being an unprecedented time for many of us, the one thing that has always occurred throughout the history of the world is change. And there have been different ways that have forced us to change. 9/11 forced us to change in a lot of ways. And so I think our mindset can be shaped around the idea that this is a threat to our well-being and a threat to who we are and what we know about ourselves, or we can see it as an opportunity, right? To kind of think outside the box. Maybe we pivot in our professions a little bit. Maybe we pivot in the way that we're interacting with our family. All those things we put off. Oh, I don't have time to do this with my kids. I don't have time to teach them how to cook or to read the Bible or to play soccer or whatever that is. We now kind of have that time. And so instead of fighting against it, maybe embracing it as an opportunity to change. And ultimately, as human beings, when we are put under pressure and in these types of high stress environments, our ability to break through them is related to how we can normalize and optimize those stress levels. And having the right mindset is a key factor in how we can get through.
What would you say to someone who responds to that third item and says, that's all well and good, but I'm not sure I can put food on the table. Being able to embrace this time with my children, sounds great, but I'm not even sure we have lost our income. We're not going to be able to pay our rent or our mortgage. I can't even, see past dinner tonight or, dinner, next Monday night. What would you say to someone who's under that sort of a threat or circumstance?
And I know there are probably a lot of people out there in that same situation. One of the greatest things we can do for ourselves is to focus on what we can control instead of what we can't control. And so shaping our mindset around that, I think, is the first step. And part of that is also living more in the present moment. There are going to be worries and catastrophes that we're all going to create and probably make them even worse for ourselves. And I'm not trying to negate or lessen anybody's anxiety or fears about these types of real world issues, because they are real world. But a lot of times we take it even a step further with the way our mind builds up excess stress and catastrophes that are really not rooted in reality. Right? We'll tell ourselves like this is the end of the world, or, I'm never going to be able to put food on the table. And those types of messages and the internal messaging we have with ourselves are really not helpful. So the more you can stay present and focus on what you can control in this moment. So how can I use my skill sets right now, maybe in a different and creative way? How can I leverage some of the resources that are available to me? This new stimulus for a lot of small business owners will be very helpful, but there is paperwork that has to be filled out to do it, right? It's not just something you're going to automatically get. So maybe shifting some of your focus and energy to filling that out and doing what you can to help yourself in those scenarios. One other way to a lot of us that get really caught up in our own worries and problems, giving to others and finding ways in our community to connect and give back. We may find places where our skill sets are vitally important to other people and they're them getting through this. And through that, we may find a way not only to give back, but to find a personal journey for us that will better, our situation. So I know that that can sound like the easy answer for some people, and it's not, because it is very difficult. But I think kind of focusing on those presence, what you can control, and giving back in some way can help us all adjust.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking is that this is a time to ask for help when you need it. And like you said, look for resources. There's food banks and that sort of thing. But just whether it's asking a neighbor for help, a younger, healthy neighbor can go to the grocery store for you if you're uncomfortable doing it, and just tapping into resources that we do have. And who knows, I haven't seen or haven't read a lot about the stimulus package at this point. So I don't know how much is really going to help people. But I think taking advantage of every opportunity just to at least kick the ball down the road a little bit, so that the things that we think are imminent, whether it's the mortgage payment, if we can kick that down the road a little bit just to regroup and get the help that we need, I think that's really helpful.
Exactly. You make a great point about asking for help as well. Like, none of us should expect to come through this crisis alone. That goes back to this idea of staying socially connected, having the ability to really connect with those around us, and asking for help when we need it. Because if we ask for help, they might also need help. Like, by us kind of getting the opportunity and opening up the conversation, there may be ways that we can help each other right there in our communities. I think it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that this is a difficult time for a lot of people, like a really difficult time for a lot of people. Like it's hard on us all, but I think there are some people, like even for myself, I will just tell you straight up that like I'm a really optimistic person, and I can see myself, out of a lot of situations, but there have been times where I have just thought, this is a real bummer. One of the things that I've done to kind of mitigate that is not hit the refresh button on my news. So I'm not just completely absorbed with that. And I got to tell you, if I can just, put the pause button on that, I feel so much better. And I just know that about myself. But for those people who maybe even have a family and they do have to take care of other people, but they're struggling themselves, are there ways that they can kind of pick themselves up and maybe pull themselves out of this a little bit?
Yes. If you go back to the research and science and evidence-based practices in this space of, those who are able to kind of perform at their best, especially in these stressful environments, we find a common thread that a lot of them devote an amount of time toward recovery and self-care. Because in order to show up, especially under challenging circumstances, to be your best self. And what I mean by that is not in a selfish way, like, you need to be your best. But when you think about you showing up to be the role model and leader your family needs, for you to show up to be available to those in a professional capacity as well as a personal capacity when I'm talking about, our families. And so if you're struggling, which like I started off in the beginning to say, we all are struggling. So one of the best things we can do for ourselves is not try to pour from an empty cup. And in fact, we can even equate this cup, and this is something we teach in the Warrior's Edge program with Dr. Gervais, is a lot of times the way chronic stress works for us is we don't have enough, right, in our cup to kind of give it to all the people that need help from us on a day-to-day basis. And so by the time we get to those self-care practices, there's really nothing left, right? We don't have that energy left. But what we're trying to teach is that when you fill the cup up first for yourself, you have more to give to everybody else. And that in turn, right, creates a better foundation for you to start from. I don't want people to think of it as some type of selfish space. What I want them to think about it as a way to kind of secure their own oxygen mask, right? We would do it in a plane without thinking twice, right? We put on ourselves before we put on our child. But in our life, we're trying to take care of everybody else, right? We're leaving ourselves last. And that's not how we can serve and lead others better. So with the self-care and recovery practices, there are some things we can do for ourselves here at home And this is not an all-inclusive list by any means, nor is it a checklist that every day you have to do all of these things. But here's some things you can think about. How do you manage your stress? Maybe this is the perfect time if you've said to yourself, gosh, I should really try mindfulness meditation, but I've never had time to do it before. This might be the perfect opportunity to do that. Try to laugh a little bit more, right? Having fun, getting out into nature. The outdoors are not closed right now, right? For most of us, we have the ability to get outside with physical distancing of 6 feet, but get outside. My family and I, we went for a hike yesterday. Out on Antelope Island. Connecting with an old friend can be another way to help you manage your stress, right? Just sharing some of your feelings with someone that provides a safe space for you. Eating healthy, right? This is kind of an interesting opportunity to maybe shift some of your dietary staples, try something new, interact with your children in a way to teach them about healthy eating. Staying physically active is very important, whether that's indoors or outdoors, but doing something to kind of, like what I say, get your oxygen for the day. And then sleep patterns. I know a lot of us have anxiety, which prevents us from achieving that quality level of sleep. We may lay in bed for the required 7 to 9 hours is really what everyone should get, but maybe only get 3 or 4 hours of actual sleep time. And many times that's because of the anxiety and the catastrophizing that goes on in our head. And so a couple techniques for that is to either, if it's to-do lists or those types of things that are stressing you out, putting them down in a notebook before you go to bed, kind of leaving all your thoughts in that book will help your mind relax and kind of release those memories. Because what we do all day is we tell our minds, don't forget this, don't forget that, and so when you go to bed, your mind all of a sudden is like, hey, you told me not to forget all these things. So maybe writing them down, or if it's worries and stressors that are keeping you up, doing what's called a progressive muscle relaxation can be very helpful for folks, right? If you channel all your attention and energy on something like your right big toe. Like right now, if we all as listeners concentrate on all the sensations being provided by our right big toe, right? Maybe it feels tight, maybe it feels loose, maybe it feels hot or cold or itchy, or maybe we feel our sock, maybe we can sense our shoe, maybe we even sense the ground beneath our feet, right? All of these sensations being provided by our right big toe. We never focus on that, right? There's always a feeling there. We always feel something. We just never really pay attention to it. So when you do that at night and you start with your big toe and you just focus on those sensations, kind of relaxing the muscles and working your way up through your ankle, through your calf. Many times, I know for me, by the time I'm up to like my upper leg or my hip, I'm out and I'm asleep, because my mind suddenly is not thinking about the stressors, it's thinking about those sensations.
Those are all really great tips. And I do want to say too, I love your wording around physical distancing rather than social distancing, because it's crazy. But I mean, more people are making phone calls and checking in with people and texting and getting on video calls and video conferencing with people more than ever. So we are making these social connections, much more. So I really like that term of just physical distancing from people. And I think too, for those people who feel like maybe they don't have maybe someone around them, either family or a close network, maybe this is the time. There's nothing wrong with it to start reaching out to people, because people have more time right now. They are, for the most part, like, unless you're working front lines and you're doing double duty in terms of your work, I think a lot of people do have some more and flexible time right now. Take that opportunity to reach out to people that you normally wouldn't. And I bet that they will be available also. Or if they're not available, they would certainly appreciate just hearing from you. More social and more physical distancing, not social distancing.
Yes, we need to start changing that message.
I know. I love that. Once something gets said and it gets out into the lexicon, it's hard to kind of change that. But I think that if we can get that word out, that phrase out more, I think it's super helpful. Anything else that you would want to recommend to people or provide to people? I think like you've got some really excellent information here and thinking and framing, that we can go forward with this. But is there anything else that you would just like to add before we end here?
The last thing I would just like to leave your listeners with is the idea of compassion and forgiveness. I think right now we have expectations based on how we were living our lives, what our normal was. And for most of us, the uncertainty creates this fear and ambiguity. It has us putting our our prior expectations on this new normal. And then there's going to be an inconsistency. And then when we introduce the fear and ambiguity and uncertainty, our mind starts to fill in the blanks. And a lot of times those blanks get filled with these ideas of what perfect looks like or what we should be doing or what the expectations are. And so with that, I just want everyone to take a step back when they are feeling that stress response and that overwhelm sometimes. Take like 2 deep breaths and just demonstrate compassion and forgiveness for themselves, understanding that they are not going to be perfect because there is no definition of perfect right now. And we are going to constantly be changing and learning and failing. I know I do every day with my kids. I am not like, we're being thrown in a situation where we're professionals and now we're homeschooling our kids or doing public school from home. As teachers, as coaches, right? We're doing their athletics with them. We're having all of these roles put on top of us. And the worst thing we can do is tie those to certain expectations. So demonstrating compassion and forgiveness for ourselves in this process and for our partners, right? As we all kind of figure it out together, I think is probably one of the most important things we can also be doing for ourselves.
Well, when you first said compassion, I was thinking about compassion for others, because what I'm seeing, it's the most bizarre thing to me. Like I know people are talking about how we're all coming together in this situation, but I see more division with this than I do in politics. Like I see this divisiveness almost more strongly. And I know it comes from a place of fear. I think having that compassion for others right now, it's like, it's just blown me away, just how divisive people have gotten with this. And if we can just remember that we're all coming from a place of fear right now, a lot of people are coming from a place of fear right now. And if we can just bring forgiveness into that and kind of understand that, then we'll get through it.
Yes. And that you bring up a very valid point. A lot of times that compassion for others really starts with that compassion for yourself. Because if you don't have that compassion for yourself, it's going to be reflected in how you interact with others, right? Because you're trying to blame, right? A lot of times, like the responsibility and blame that comes for the situation you're in. If you don't have enough compassion and forgiveness for yourself to understand that, all these things that are happening, you're doing your best. Right. But if you're looking for external ways to kind of, put blame on the situation you're in, there is going to be a lack of compassion you have toward others in the community. And so I think that they both work hand in hand, right? This is a time in our world where compassion is how we're going to get through it. It really is. That compassion and understanding for our neighbors is vitally important.
Super. Jannell, thanks so much for your time and jumping on this call with me, and just all the great advice that you have here too. It's very inspiring and very positive. So I really appreciate that.
Of course, my pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you, Beth.
Oh, good. Well, we got to get you out to Seattle when things calm down, and we'll have a proper sit down and a catch up on everything.
For sure. I would love that.
I'll add a link to the Warrior's Edge program in the show notes, which includes a free online course for COVID-19 first responders and healthcare providers. Don't forget to check out episode number 53 for a more in-depth conversation with Jannell. And hopefully I'll have her back again soon for a longer form conversation once we get back to some semblance of normalcy. You can find that episode and all of my other episodes at shesboldpodcast.com/episodes or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. If you'd like to support the show and let me know how much you are inspired by these conversations and how much you look forward to hearing these uplifting stories and get these fantastic tips from my guests, go to patreon.com/bebold. Patreon supporters get to submit questions for me to ask guests and become part of our private Facebook group, and that is ladies only. They also get access to bonus content, including questions I ask of the guest. To keep up with me in all of my travels, when I am traveling, that is, you can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram at both Beth Whitwa, BETHWHITWA, and Wandergal. Feel free to leave a message or question at 877-280-5170. I do love feedback. You can also email me at beth@shesboldpodcast.com. Ladies, don't forget to join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/BeBoldGroup for support and encouragement for whatever ways you're trying to be bold. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. And until next time, be bold.